And we are live. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the Finance meeting of March 27th, 2025. And as always, we will begin with the land acknowledgement. Grimsby is situated on treaty land. This land is steeped in the rich history of the First Nations, such as the Hattaway-Wendoronk, the Haudenosaunee, and the Anishinaabe, including the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. There are many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people from across Turtle Island that live and work in Niagara today. The regional municipality of Niagara and the town of Grimsby stand with all Indigenous people, past and present, in promoting the wise stewardship of the lands on which we live. As always, item number 3 on our agenda is disclosure of interest. And if I could ask if there are any disclosures of pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest this evening from the committee members. I see none. That will be so noted in the minutes. Then item number 4 is the approval of the agenda. Does anyone have any amendments, or could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Howe has moved that, and Councillor Vardy is seconding that. Any questions on the agenda before I call for the vote? Then it's resolved that the agenda for March 27th, 2025, Finance Committee be approved. By show of hands, all those in favor? And that is unanimous, so I won't ask if any object. Item number 5 on our agenda is receipt of the previous minutes, and they are attached there. So before we entertain any questions, could I have a mover and a seconder to receive the previous meeting minutes? Member Thompson. Pardon me. A seconder, Councillor Howe. So are there any questions or amendments that people saw were needed to the minutes of February 27th? And the GDAC minutes as well of March 6, 2025. I don't see any hands up, so resolved that the following minutes be approved: the Finance Committee of February 27th, 2025, and the Grimsby Economic Development Advisory Committee minutes of March 6th, 2025. By show of hands, all those in favor, please. Thank you, and that is unanimous, so that is carried. Item number 6 is delegations, and we have none that I am aware of, which moves us to the consent reports of item number 7. So there are 3 items in the consent report. Number 1 is the annual building permit fee report. Number 2 is the rescue decontamination washer project. And item number 3 is the Peach King Center cost update. They are here as consent reports, which means unless I have a motion from someone to pull that for further discussion or questions, then we will just have a motion to approve them and continue on with the agenda. Any questions or comments? Anyone wish to have any of these discussed further? I'm not seeing any hands up, so then, did I have a mover and a seconder for that? Thank you. Member Thompson, a seconder. Member Scandinavo. Resolved that the Finance Committee hereby approves the following items and that the consent items be approved on the recommendations as contained therein. So pardon me, folks, there's a few. That report, Finance 25-17, the 2024 Annual Building Permit Fee Report that is dated March 27, 2025, be received for information, and that the 2024 Annual Building Permit Fee Report be made publicly available on the town's website and upon request in accordance with the Building Code Act. That's part 1. Part 2, that the report Finance 25-22 on the rescue decontamination washer project budget amendment dated March 27, 2025 be received, and that the Finance Committee recommend Council approve the budget amendment of $8,540 funded from the Fire Equipment Replacement Reserve. And the last item, that report 25-24, the Peach King Center expansion cost update dated March 2025. Sorry, the report is for March 2025. It is dated March 27th, 2025, be received. All those in favor of accepting these in the consent section? By show of hands, that is all carried and unanimous. Which brings us to item number 9 on our agenda this evening, which is a discussion report. And so the first item, number 1, is Finance Report 25-18, which is on the statement of remuneration and expenses for members of council and council appointments to boards. Could I have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor? Councillor Vardy and Councillor Howe will be the seconder. And now I will turn to Mr. Delmonico and ask him just to walk us through that.
Thank you. Good evening. This is a report that's provided annually to committee and council. It's a requirement of the Municipal Act that this be reported on before the end of the quarter the following year. And it outlines the remuneration and expenses paid to councillors and committee members. Remuneration includes salaries and honorariums, including benefit contributions to CPP, OMERS, and health benefits. Expenses include things like costs to attend conferences, seminars, and training sessions, mileage, cell phone office supplies, or other expenses that may have been incurred by council and approved committee members in the performance of their duties. The current council expense policy has been included for reference as Appendix A, and Appendix B contains the detailed summary by councillor and committee appointee. If there's any questions.
Councillor Vardy.
Thank you, through you, Chair. I just have a question. I'm looking at my own expenses here, and I see an amount of $79.02 for printing stationery supplies. Is that because I asked to have the finance book printed for me? Because I not received any stationery other than that, so.
I believe it may have been business cards. Does that sound familiar?
Seems kind of pricey for business cards, but yeah.
I could look into that and get back to you.
Yeah, thank you. I know I didn't get any paper.
Councillor Howe.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Tony, mileage and meeting expenses, 6 of us have got $9.63 on there. I've got no idea what it pertains to. I'm one of the 6.
That's actually been allocated to everyone. It's part of everyone's allocation. It refers to the budget dinner, pre-budget meeting dinner that was provided to councillors at the 2024 session.
Are there any other questions about any items? Yes, Member DeMare, go ahead.
As this is new to me, so I'm just going through this, but I'm just wondering, it says conferences, so maybe someone could explain to me that, is it just one conference a year, or is there 2 conferences, or how does that break out? And is this what is going on with most municipalities in requirements for this? Maybe I'm just a little bit, untrained on this. I just wanted to know.
If you could shut your mic off, Tony can turn it.
Yeah, there is a council conference and training budget that's allocated every year, and there's typically AMO and the Rural Ontario Municipal Association conferences are the ones that are attended by council. The mayor, I believe, also attended the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Conference. So yeah, it is fairly standard. We are actually re-looking at the council expense policy, and that'll be going directly to council with an update.
Just to give some background to it, there was a notice of motion from a councillor a few weeks ago asking that staff go back and look at the expense policy again and update it. So it will cover things like that too. Councillor Vardy.
Yeah, just like to say that at both of these meetings, well, particularly AMO, you'll see most councillors from most municipalities in Ontario. And for the Roma, because it's kind of rural urban, it'll be mostly sort of the areas that have a rural component or are completely rural.
Well, thank you for that information. Is this going to continue, or is it going to be increases in that or decreases to those conferences? Are more conferences needed? Or have they been staying pretty much for the last number of years?
Yeah, it's been fairly stable. Those two tend to be the ones that are attended, the AMO and the Roma, and then the mayor tends to go to the FCM. That's typically what happens, but it could vary from year to year.
Well, that's good for making sure that we are keeping in touch with other municipalities, know that we're listening to what's going on in the province.
Councillor Vardy.
Yeah, if I could also add to that, at these conferences, most, or at least for AMO, almost all provincial ministers attend. And this is also the place where we ask in advance to bring certain issues forward. So we also use that time and meet with ministers and all their staff to push forward on things that we're looking to see. I mean, we pushed the hospital for a long time. We continue to look for the Bartlett extension, the GO station. So it's not just strictly a passive event, but we're also there speaking with ministers and trying to push forward for, advocate for Grimsby.
Okay, that's more information. That's great, because it's necessary to have the government, tuned into the government, because there's for a number of issues around funding, and of course, with the change in government that may happen federally, this may impact other areas in the provinces. So this is all good stuff. Thanks.
Any other questions on this particular report?
He needs to be ejected.
Then, seeing no further questions, I will call for the vote, and I'll read the resolution first. So resolve that report, Finance 25-18, the 2024 Statement of Remuneration and Expenses for members of council and council appointments to boards dated March 27th, 2025, be received for information. By show of hands, all those in favor? And that is passed unanimously. The second discussion report that we have in front of us tonight deals with our 2024 portfolio investment report. If I could have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Councillor Howe. Member Thompson will second that. And I'll ask Mr. Delmonico to briefly summarize it for us.
Thank you. Per the Municipal Act, the Treasurer is required to report on portfolio investments on an annual basis. So you'll see that in the report, Appendix A provides a summary of our current holdings, and Appendix B summarizes the activity in the year in terms of holdings that matured and new investments that were purchased. As part of the investment portfolio, the town holds various bonds and GICs. We realized $2.1 million in investment income in 2024 from those holdings. That represents a 4.8% return on those investments. We also realized a further $1.9 million in bank interest earned from our bank deposit holdings for a total return of $4 million. In addition to that, we also have a $5 million invested in the One Fund. That's a Canadian equity fund, and that had market value just over $5 million at the end of 2024. Interest earned on funds and obligatory reserves go back to those reserves, so that equaled $1.4 million, and that relates to reserves like development charge reserves, the former gas tax reserve, the building department reserve, for example. The remaining investment income of 2.6 million is reported as investment income as part of the operating budget. So we had budgeted investment income to be 2.4 million in 2024, so we're realizing roughly 200,000 surplus as a result of that. Is there any questions or comments?
Member Demare, go ahead.
Again, it's the first time I've seen one of these things in this new role, so bear with me for a second. There is, on Appendix A, you indicate, it's the total of your investments, securities, $58 million face value, and of course, market value 59. But looking at the breakouts there, and there's BMO GICs, and then there's CIBC investment portfolio of 40 million roughly now, and that's 68% of the town and Grimsby's assets, and it produces a very similar return to the BMO GICs, around 4.65%. The purchase management fees of GICs are usually much lower because there's not, you're buying already a set package, versus private investment firms who charge a fee for the management of the portfolio. So if, 68% of your portfolio is being managed by a private firm, management fees can be upwards to 2% to through 2.5%. So the question is, since the return is not significantly variable from that point of view, and it's no big increase over that, so might we be overpaying if we're paying a very high fee for what we can get without having CIBC investment portfolio? And I believe that's through Hobson Chantel Advisory Group, part of the Wood Gundy. And it does it for many municipalities, so we're not alone in that. So I'm saying that's been around since, I guess it was 1989, whatever. And they've been doing this for years. And of course, many people have been utilizing investment firms, and they've been charging management fees around 1%, 2%, 3%. And they realize that you can do this by just buying standard package GICs or investments at 1% MER fees or management fees. So the question is, everybody's questioning now, is this really the best way to get the best return? And again, from my background, I was in the insurance business. We were managing surpluses of very large, very similar amounts to that. And we had the same thing. We had looked at it and said, what are we getting for our return? So the question, has that been examined in the sense that maybe we're paying more for private investment, but we're not getting the big hit that private investment firms are supposed to be getting? Because they're required to have very low-risk investments. So they're not going out and playing the stock market crazily. So I understand that as part of a municipality, but the point is, can we not get it done at the same interest return at a much lower cost?
So yeah, thank you for that question. It's a good question. I think the thing is with the GICs, what you have is the reinvestment risk of when they mature. And we wouldn't be able to get that level of interest rate now, for example, on those GICs. These were purchased previously. The nice thing with the bonds is that they also provide some good liquidity for us that those GICs don't. We have to hold those GICs to maturity to realize that interest. And so we've been operating in a relatively high interest rate environment the last couple of years. And the nice thing about the bonds is that when the rates go down, it's the inverse relationship. The market value of the bonds goes up. So there's a couple advantages to holding those bonds now, and we do meet with our investment advisor on a regular basis, and we do expect interest rates to continue to trend down for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I understand all that, but the point is that I'm not sure what is in the CIBC investment portfolio that this payment manager is paying, and I don't know the fee you're paying the manager. Did they disclose that to you?
Yes, it's a paid at purchase. I don't recall exactly what it was now, but it's taken at time of when we transact and purchase and sell.
But isn't there not an overall management fee they tack on to that, as most private investment firms do?
Yeah, I don't have that with me right now. If Angela's on the line, maybe she could chime in.
Hi, good evening, and through you, Chair. CIBC, when we purchase these investments, the fee that they charge, as Tony said, it's at the time of purchase, but it is embedded in the rates that are and netted against the rates that we're listing on that schedule. So we are not charged an annual fee from them or any additional costs except receiving those rates that are listed on the schedule there.
Okay, so in other words, they don't get any compensation for doing the work.
Fee that they include when they purchase, but that is deducted from the fee that's stated on the face of the investment, and that's what we receive as interest payments is a stated rate. There's no further adjustments at that time.
Okay, so when you purchase the investment, they put on their management charge at that time?
It's managed at the purchase desk.
I think you're
And
meaning
we are just showing the actual certificate with the rate.
This question, I think it might require some more investigation just to make sure of comparison purposes, because this is happening throughout many places where investments are done. They're questioning how much is being charged for their service, and I just thought we might want to check into that just to be sure, and if it is, we're not being, overly charged, that's great. We get some investment advice, but it depends what they're buying. If they're playing the stock market, that's a little risky thing, and of course, you're paying for that advice. But if it's just buying bonds and GICs that can be managed, without their involvement, then it's going to be saving money over the long term.
And it is just bonds and GICs.
I realize some of these questions our staff don't necessarily have the immediate answers for this evening. Would it be worth it just to ask you to take it away and come back and share with the committee sort of what their fee structure is and how it works for us, and perhaps even a summary of what the fees were, if you're able to do that? I realize this particular firm, we switched investment advisors partway through the year last year, so our fees for 2024 are probably a combination of the first firm and then the next firm after that. But would the committee find that to be useful if staff could just take that away and come back with more information at the next finance meeting? I'm going to ask our clerk, do we need a resolution for that?
Probably should.
So we'll take 30 seconds here.
Yeah.
I'll give you a minute even to draft the resolution. Then I'm going to ask our clerk to read that resolution to us. We don't have the ability at this meeting to put it up on the screen, so we'll listen carefully.
Resolve that the committee requests council to direct staff to summarize our investment fees for 2024 and how they are calculated, and present that at the next Finance Committee meeting.
Yes, an amendment?
I think it would be address the 2024 investment fees, in particular, the fee for purchase and the fee for management fees, just to define if there is a separation.
Resolve that the committee requests council to direct staff to summarize the town of Grimsby's investment fees for purchase and fees for management for 2024 and how they are calculated, and present that at the next Finance Committee meeting.
That sounds good.
Okay, so you've heard the resolution, but before we will address this first before we go to accept the report. So I need someone to move and second this one. So Member Demare, and that's seconded by Councillor Vardy. By show of hands, all those in favor of this resolution? And that is carried unanimously. Any other questions about the report itself before I ask for the motion to accept the report? If there are no further questions, then the resolution is resolved that Report Finance 25-19, the 2024 portfolio investments dated March 27th, 2025, be received for information. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. And that is carried. The third item under our discussion reports has to do with our international plowing match and the Rural Expo and the sponsorship thereof. If I could have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor. I knew Councillor Howe was going to have his hand up first. Councillor Vardy is seconding that. Go ahead, Mr. Delmonico.
Thanks. The recommendation here is to provide $15,000 in funding to the International Plowing Match, which is scheduled to take place in West Niagara later this year. The event will be held September 16th to 20th, 2025. It's expected to bring in thousands of visitors and provide millions in economic impact to the area. In addition to the plowing competitions, the event will feature exhibitors, vendors, music, and local artisans. And the funding source is proposed to be the Tax Stabilization and Contingency Reserve.
Questions or comments? Councillor Vardy.
Thank you. I'm just curious to know how this money is to be spent. Is it to be given to the International Plowing Match people, or is it for things that we want to do for the town in collaboration with that event happening?
Yeah, through the chair, this would be a grant to the Plowing Match folks.
Thank you.
I saw Councillor Howe had his hand up, and then Member Scandinavo after that.
Through you, Chair. This amount is basically the seed money to get it rolling up there, and has mostly to do with infrastructure type items that'll have to be done. There's going to be a lot of road work. There's going to be culverts that have to go in, but it's seed money for this point to get the thing kick-started. There will be, this says, this is specific to that location up there. There will be, once we get all our ducks in a row, there'll be a further request coming to sponsor municipal, our plans, activities and efforts to enjoy some of the monies that are going to be flowing through here. And it is big. If you do some homework and talk to, if you know anybody that's been in one of the municipalities that has the plowing match, the last two that we talked to, Kawartha and Kemptville, the last question I asked them, would you do it again? Without question, yes. So and Kemptville, the first 2 days were rained out. Still said yes immediately, so.
Member Scandinavo, you had your hand up.
Yes, thanks. I think this might just be semantics, and I think it's been clarified, but it says budget amendment of 15,000, but I'm understanding that as like the total amount we're giving, meaning that we're amending the budget by 15,000 as it wasn't previously in there. Is that correct? Okay, thanks. That's what I figured, but just thought I'd ask.
And sorry, I wasn't looking at Mr. Delmonico while that was going on, but he was nodding his head, I'm guessing. I was just trying to find my notes when when some of the leadership team from the International Plowing Match was here. I believe and I did write it down, but I can't find it fast enough as we're talking about it now. I thought they said something like they're expecting 70,000 visitors, and the economic impact, because this match takes place every year, the economic impact has been calculated to the neighboring municipalities, I thought in the neighborhood of like $35 million, or I could be wrong on those numbers because I can't find it fast enough where I wrote it down, but it is huge. It is that they talk now, yeah. It is a big number, so I hear you that this 15,000 is just the start. I believe the town will be, not just will be, is currently working on ideas as to how to promote the town in this event and things that we'll need to do, whether it's anything from creating maps, signage, Wayfair signage, activities, booths, handouts. There will be more yet to do. The whole idea is to try and draw those people, hopefully to have them come through Grimsby to get to the actual physical event, and that, of course, to draw them back and to spend their evenings and weekends in our town as much as possible. So there will be more as we kind of flesh that out, I think. Any further questions on that? Yes, Member Demare.
So I understand that in Southern Ontario, and you have this rotation so that they go from area to area every couple of years.
Right through Ontario, not just southern Ontario.
Okay.
East, west, and north as well.
So throughout Ontario, and you have to be, it's in Niagara for a certain period, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years?
4 days.
4 days, so you have for that year, right?
Yeah, for this year.
Okay,
Put
so.
on the mic. Member Demare, if you could change.
Oh, I got my outdoor voice on too. The September 16th to the 20th, 20th being a Saturday. Just to give you, some numbers, an RV park, 100 acres. And these people don't travel with the way I traveled with a 10-foot pop-up. No, they travel. There will be plowing for 4 days. There's even horse-drawn plowing competitions, to watch some of the people that really take it serious. There's all kinds of vendor booths. The Kawarthas, and usually they have a community tent. Their art gallery was in it, and they did phenomenal. I was talking to the director of their art gallery up there. They did phenomenal. So it's a big deal, and these people are quite comfortable. Now, is it going to change anything with what Carrot Top is doing to us? I don't know, but they're well-positioned people.
I did find my notes, by the way. So it said the last time it was in this area was 1926 in Niagara Falls. And I had written down they're expecting 70 to 80,000 guests. And that evening, they told us a $30 million economic impact on participating municipalities around it. So even if it's 25 million and not 30, it's still a heck of a lot of money, right? Question, yes.
So I understand now it's a 1 year situation, and you're putting some effort and money into it, into a little bit of work around, along with other areas in there, in this area, right? West Link and everything else. So you're building together. and you're going to get this massive impact of return for that. So you're sharing the cost and you get a massive return, but it's only for the 1 year because the next year it's somewhere else. And another community will get the bulb, but still it's like for 1 year, spend a little money and get a lot more money. So from that point of view, that's a great financial decision, I think. Okay.
And in this case, I mean, we are going to spend the money as a municipality, but the financial impact goes back to the businesses and so on that are in our town. It will take some, I will say, staff effort as well. Our fire department, we have our chief here this evening, our director of public works, like they're all going to be very involved in all of this as they get ready and prepare for the event and make sure they have all their, I'll say, ducks lined up. Anything you want to add to it, Chief, as to, what your involvement is so far that you could share with the committee?
Yeah, thank you. Through you, Chair. Definitely, as you mentioned, we have been involved in the planning aspects of it. It is a very, very large public event that's going to impact the community in a good way, but we also have to manage it in a safe manner so that the rest of the town actually can function. Things like providing, fire protection for those 50,000 plus residents, visitors, so on. So yeah, we are very heavily involved in all of Niagara West, including West Lincoln, Grimsby, Lincoln. So thank you.
Councillor Howe?
Thank you, through you, Chair. And Mr. Demir, probably most people have heard me spew on about this. Kawartha, which is Peterborough area and up in that area. The year that they had 2 years ago, they had a dinner at the end of it for the volunteers, just the volunteers. There were 600 volunteers that were helping to run that operation. So, and the people that have been doing it, the plowing match is an actual company. IPM is an actual company. They're in Guelph. They've been up there for probably over 100 years, I think it is. They've been around the horn, and everybody has always been quite impressed and happy with it, unless Mother Nature decides that I'm going to completely do it to you guys, but that's the luck of the draw. So.
If there are no other further questions on that, then the resolution is that resolved that Finance Report 25-20, 2025, the International Plowing Match and the Rural Expo sponsorship, dated March 27, 2025, be received, and that one, the Finance Committee recommends to Council they approve a budget amendment of $15,000 to support the 2025 International Plowing Match and Rural Expo, and secondly, that the Finance Committee recommends that the budget amendment of $15,000 be funded from the Levy Program Contingency and Stabilization Reserve. All those in favor by show of hands, please. And that is carried with no objections. The fourth item on our agenda this evening, under discussion reports, has to do with our drone report on Station 2 and the IT upgrades as well, which involves a budget amendment. If I could have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor for discussion. Councillor Vardy has moved that. A seconder. Councillor Howe. Mr. Delmonico, will you explain it or will we have the chief or together? Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, this report covers two separate projects that were anticipated to be funded from grants. We were expecting these grants to be awarded by now, but they have not yet been. And the fire department would like to move forward with these projects, so we were asking for a total budget amendment of $82,000 in order to proceed. One project relates to the drone purchase. The other relates to IT upgrades for Fire Station 2. With respect to the drone, $43,000 in grant funding was originally budgeted for and expected to be funded from the grant. Now, the latest cost estimates indicate that $57,000 will now be needed to purchase the drone. So as a result, we're recommending a budget amendment to fund the full $57,000 cost of purchase from the Fire Equipment Reserve. And then any grant funding that we do end up receiving would go back to the reserve. The benefits of the drone are that it would enhance the town's emergency response capabilities by providing aerial surveillance, enabling quick assessments by the fire department for incidents in progress. The drone would also help with post-incident assessments, aiding in resource allocation and planning. The other budget amendment relates to Station 2 upgrades for equipment used at the Emergency Operations Center, and it would allow us to replace out-of-date TV monitors and computer equipment to improve information management and exchange. During non-emergency times, the TV monitors will be utilized for corporate staff training and exercises to further help train and develop roles and responsibilities during EOC activation. So as part of the 2025 budget, it was anticipated that the TV upgrades would be funded from the same grant as the drone, allowing the monitor upgrades to proceed this year with the computer upgrades planned for 2026. We're now planning to replace both monitors and computer equipment together in 2025, so we're requesting funding of $7,000 to replace the grant and moving up the 2026 budget allocation of $18,000 to 2025 to now. So that's a total budget amendment of $25,000, which would also be funded from the fire equipment reserve. Is there any questions?
If I could just ask, did you say there's an amendment to the report that originally the report was requesting 50, but now it's 57, or did I just misunderstand that?
No, not an amendment to the report before you, just an amendment to the budget that was presented as part of the 2025 budget.
Thank you. Councillor Barty?
Through you, Chair, I'd like to know where the drone will be housed.
I think we'll ask, if you'll shut that off, we'll ask the chief to expand upon the drone project.
Yes, thank you. So the drone will be housed in our central fire station, and the intent would be to have it ready to deploy within minutes as part of our emergency operations. So whenever we get a call, we'd be able to deploy it quickly.
So you mean Grimsby?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Howe, and then Member Scandinavo.
Through you, Chair, to the Chief. Chief, and here I go, the IPM, did it kind of trigger moving up that IT upgrade from next year to this year? Oh, sorry.
That was certainly one of the considerations we were looking at. The other piece to this is when we were consulting with our colleagues in information technology, we looked at the technology as a whole in the Station 2 and realized it is 8-ish years old. It is getting a little long in the tooth. And if we're going to do some technology upgrades in there, it just makes sense to look at it as a whole and combine the both projects at once. So.
Just as a follow-up, Chief, that grant, the Community Emergency Preparedness Grant, is it usually kind of delayed, like in some of the grants? Eventually it's going to come in, or have we been denied that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. This is a fairly new grant. The first phase of it was last year. We were not successful last year. This for 2025 with the second intake. Interestingly enough, we've had a number of calls put into the ministry to find out the status of it. We've had no response whatsoever, either to the positive, to the negative. Interestingly enough, we just had a provincial election, and Emergency Management Ontario has been restructured in a major way. They're now part of their own ministry. So I don't know for sure, but I suspect strongly that perhaps this was part of the delay. I've spoken with fire chiefs from around the area, and no one who has applied this year has heard anything about it. So I guess that leads me to be guardedly optimistic that we still could get it. But we would like to move forward with the economic uncertainty in today's age. We'd like to secure the equipment before duties or tariffs kick in or prices go up. So that's why we're pushing it forward now. Thanks.
Member Scandinavo was next.
Thank you. I I think there may be a small typo on recommendation 2. I think it should be funded from the fire equipment replacement reserve, if I've understood that correctly. I have it as just from the equipment replacement reserve. In the last line there.
So in the main report, what page was that?
Sorry, under the recommendations, recommendation number 2, the last line says funded from the equipment replacement reserve. I'd imagine that's meant to read the fire equipment replacement reserve. Anyways, that wasn't my question. I just so happened to to notice that. In a nutshell, I'm certainly no expert on fire equipment or what's needed or whatnot. Defer to the fire chief for all that stuff. And I certainly understand, and thank you for explaining the need to sort of bring that up and want to do that in advance of knowing whether the grant comes through. I guess my only question and comment, it's not even specifically about this, it's something we've somewhat spoken about in the past, is that we often get requests to approve things from reserves. And the issue I have with that is, think of it like a long-range plan or a long-term plan. It's difficult to approve something out of a reserve to the magnitude of, I think it was $82,000 in total, when you're unsure if there's other items that may be of, equal importance or, even higher importance that may eat into the reserve that's needed for something else. So again, I'm obviously sitting here looking to say, well, the fire chief and the fire staff know what's best and know what needs to come out of the fire equipment reserve better than anyone. So I would rely on your expertise and all that. I just think as it relates to these reserves, and I know this is like a really difficult ask, but maybe as it relates to the reserves, we could have some like longer range planning for each one of them. So, when you're taking out of that pot, it makes sense to say, yeah, that's fine. Like, we our replacement into that reserve, or the next time we're planning on taking out a significant amount of money, it's several years down the road. Because it's like, spending your savings account without actually knowing really what your bigger plan is, so to speak. Anyways, it's more of a general comment. I'm obviously happy to approve this and move on with the advice of the fire chief and so on and so forth, or approve the recommendation to go to council. But I just think, perhaps with the reserves, we can have some longer term planning. And I certainly understand that's a huge ask and not a small thing. But I just find it hard. We're approving these things. I don't know if blindly is the right way to say it, right? Without knowing the bigger picture. So anyways, thank you for that, and sorry to ramble on there.
Before I give Council Party, I was just going to ask Mr. Delmonico, do you remember, or could you look up or ask someone as to what is the balance in the fire equipment reserve right now? And while you do that, I will give Councillor Vardy the floor.
Through you, Chair, I'm not sure if when we applied for the grants, we knew about the international plowing match. But I would think that it would support both knowing that we've got 70,000 visitors coming that we wouldn't normally have. I think it would support the grants, the 2 grants that we've asked for, because we do have a big event on the horizon with significant implications should something not go quite right. And might I suggest that we contact our local MPP to make sure that he is aware and that these grant requests get tied to that event, because I think the timing is important on this one. More important than just, we need a new drone, we need some upgrades.
Mr. Delmonico, did you get an opportunity to find anything there? Go ahead.
Yes, so the reserve balance after these funding requests is $282,000 in the fire equipment reserve. To Member Scandinavo's comments, that is certainly obviously valuable information, and we do plan on bringing a long-term capital plan to a future committee meeting as part of our work plan. So that would include reserve balances and projections.
But perhaps if I could just tag on to the thought of where you were going, Member Scandinavo, that perhaps in the future, when we have budget amendments where we're planning to take things from reserve, perhaps as part of that, those reports, they could always mention the amount that's in reserve and give a little summary as to what the forecasts are as to usage and so on, just so that we're doing it on a global scale, and that's on the work plan, but that as we have individual budget requests, that at least be a component of the report. Would that be helpful?
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Yeah, it's like the projected budget reserve balance is in this report, but it's like the part that I'm confused with, and again, not to sound like a broken record, is like, what else should be, or are we thinking of potentially putting as an expense in that reserve, and just having some line of sight. That's all, sort of like a longer range plan for these reserves. You know, again, not directly tied to these drones, but just a general comment.
Mr. Delmonico, would that be possible to do? Talk to us about your thoughts on that.
Yes, I think so, yeah. I mean, the current reserve balance is a lot easier to provide. It's the projection which tends to fluctuate, but we can provide our best available information as well, yeah.
In the budgeting process that council goes through, one of the things that you do in that is a 10-year forecast of capital items. And I think I recall that there was, it's not just the expenditure itself going into the future. I don't know if those schedules in our budget report actually included anything about how they would be financed. If they did, then I guess it would just be as easy as sort of pulling that information from the 10-year forecast, right? I know I make it sound like, oh, it's just so easy. Just cut and paste, right? Not quite. I realize that. But if it's not, you're right, then it's going to take a little bit of effort on the part of your department to kind of flesh out and forecast what the usage is of the balance that's in there. But any other comments from committee members or questions? While we have the chief, any questions about the drones itself, their usage, et cetera? Member Demare.
So on the drones, that's pretty expensive cost of the drones. So the question is, again, and if drones are being purchased from the U.S., that may be a problem. We have to look elsewhere, but I'm not sure the fluctuating cost of that. And there's also the aspect of what's necessary in a drone. There's different styles and different types. So is it's a high price tag? Is that mid-range? Is that low end? Is that high end? Because you can get lower price drones, and you also, pay a service for someone to do that. But I appreciate you don't want to be relying on that. You want to have it yourself. So this may subject to fluctuations by the time we get around to it. And the comment about there's a big plowing match coming forward, that may be a problem. Maybe have a drone up there. Maybe it's going to be helpful. I don't know. But is there something that you maybe need to move faster on, because before tariffs hit on drone costs? And I also looked at further in this, in our agenda, there is year-end results and transfers, and in there's a section of capital summary about the fire where you have a carry forward. So you've got some carrying forward. So now it's going to be increased, I take it. So there is sort of a discussion there what the budget was used for and what you've got going forward, which doesn't seem like a lot because you purchased the truck, I believe. So it's relatively now a small percentage, and unless there's something else that going to be added to that. So I'll put it back to you on that.
Chief, before you start, at our Joint Fire Services Committee, we had quite a discussion about fire equipment purchases from the U.S. and so on. So I know you're as up as it is possible to be on this sort of thing, and that it is on your work list as well. Maybe you can share with the committee some of those findings as well.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, a lot to unpack here. So I guess I'll start off in terms of the drone itself. Yes, it is a professional grade drone. Grimsby has been involved in drones for the past number of years. The drones we're speaking of actually require a Transport Canada license. We actually have 6 members of the fire department who have advanced pilot's licenses to be able to fly these things. So it is quite complicated, and a lot to it. A lot is very highly regulated. So we've gone through that. I'm pleased to actually say that Grimsby is very heavily involved in not only adopting drone technology, but also training. And not only are we Transport Canada licensed, but we follow NIST standards from the United States National Institute of Science and Technology, which is a forefront in drone technology. And Grimsby Training Center is the only recognized training center in all of Canada for public safety drone training. So that's a bit of a feather in our cap. So really, this is really an extension or a continuation of the drone program we already have in place. The drone equipment we're actually seeking to purchase is a next generation drone. It actually carries a payload. So for instance, it will be able to carry a personal flotation device for somebody who's floundering in the water. So we can go out there, deploy it very quickly, and then drop the PFD to them. And it's got a loudspeaker in it too, so they're reassuring the person and things like that. So that's kind of where we're at in terms of where the drone program is going. Kind of the next generation, we have trained this, actually talks about, or actually has the capability of even higher payloads to the point where we can actually carry hose up to the top of a high rise. Or when we're doing a rope rescue call in a gorge, we can actually take a stretcher down in the gorge, and that really alleviates, the strain and the wear and tear on our firefighters. So it's big. So it's really not that we're replacing our firefighters, but we're just using technology to assist in our operations. I say tongue in cheek, there's a saying out there that said, the fire service is 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. So we're trying to get rid of that and, adopt technology where it makes sense. And, this is an investment in that. In terms of the timing, you're absolutely right. There is a lot of uncertainty. At the present time, there are no tariffs on drone technology, but what happens next week could change totally. My other hat, when I go next door to Lincoln, we're in a bit of a difficult situation with a fire truck that we're waiting for delivery that's being built from the United States, and we're potentially facing a 25% tariff on a $1 million truck that was unbudgeted for. So we're really very, very concerned about that. So part of this is we'd like to move and purchase this as soon as possible before the specter of tariffs hits us. At this point, we're assured by our Canadian vendors that, they have things in stock, so they wouldn't necessarily have to import them. Last I spoke to them, but we would like to move fairly quickly on that. And just in terms of some of the carryover from one year to the next, that really depends on the truck. It can take up to 2 years to build a truck. So what we have done in previous years is to have the budget allocation, we sign the purchase order, and then a year or 2 years down the road, that's when we actually sign the check. So I hope that answers all your questions.
Are there any further questions from committee members? Member Demare, go ahead.
Yes, thank you. That answers my question. That's good information. And obviously, I didn't know that we were #1 in drone training and have accredited one of the unique places in Canada. So you have pilots already trained, and I understand the requirements for that in drone technology. So the question is, the drone will be purchased for use for emergencies. Is there any potential for that drone to be used for other things when it's non-emergency? Because you have pilots and you have a commercially high-end drone that could do other things. So was there any thought to that, about bringing revenue from that point of view?
Interesting concept. I guess that's always something we can look at. We hadn't considered that. And realistically, we'd have to, look at it, is the big picture, are the firefighters available? because we are relying on our volunteer firefighters to fly these, and our demands on their time is quite significant to the point where we're struggling to have them respond at times. But that's certainly something we're always open to suggestions for revenue and to offset some of our expenses. So that's certainly something that we could consider down the road. Sure.
Any other questions? Then I'm just going to voice a thought. I don't know if it's a question or not. But certainly this particular issue is a bit of an example of where we're budgeting and we're going on the assumption that the probability of receiving the grants is very high. And so we're putting the grants in and then we're putting the expenditure in. And certainly for fire isn't the only example. We have other departments and local boards where we're seeing this as well, where we have budgeted expenses, we have a budgeted grant where, and maybe in some of these other ones, maybe the probability of getting this one is even greater than in other examples that come to mind. And so I guess my thought or my concern is, when we're not sure of the probability of collecting the grants, should we be budgeting on the assumption that we'll use the reserves, and then if the grant comes through, that it will replenish the reserve? It's a different approach, right, I guess, and so just asking for some thoughts from our chief, from our finance director, from the committee as to, what's the most conservative way to budget? What is the safest way? And, how does this all play into our budgeting process? Member Scandinava, do you want to speak first before we ask for a response from the two gentlemen?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to jump the queue. I think it really, in my opinion, would depend on, do we need to buy this and there's an available grant that can offset it? Because then in that case, I would say, yeah, budget conservatively, assuming that you don't get the grant, but we know we need to replace this. Or are we buying this because we could use it, but there's a grant available, so we're gonna jump on the opportunity. So I'd almost say it's like a matter of individuality of the scenario, if that makes any sense, right? It sounds like in this scenario we need this, so it's like we're gonna budget for it as if we're taking it out of the reserve. If we get the grant, that's a bonus, right?
It's the opposite.
Yeah, I think it started as the opposite, but yeah, now we find ourselves in a situation where it's like, yeah, we need to jump on it and make a budget amendment to the reserve. But I think you'd have to determine whether or not, like, if you don't get the grant, you're still going to make the purchase, right? That would, for me, would be how I would approach the budgeting and the scenario about budgeting. So, anyways, I'm sorry, I did not mean to jump the queue there.
Who would like to speak first? Mr. Delmonico?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I agree. I agree with everything you both said. I think if it's something that you need to purchase regardless of whether you get the grant, then you should budget for it from reserves. And then, like you said, if you get the grant, then it becomes a bonus and you could put the grant back to reserve. And like you were saying, if it's something where it's optional, you're only going to get it if you get the grant, then it's fair to just budget from the grant. So yeah, I think that totally makes sense.
All I can say is, through you, Chair, I concur with that. I think that's a good way of doing it. Thanks.
Thank you. I guess in the latter case, I have heard from some department heads that when they go to apply for a grant, sometimes there's a question in there that says, has this been approved by council or by the board of directors or whatever the governance body is, right? They design the forms such that they want to be sure that the entity is committed to this before the grant application goes in. And so I think that's sometimes I've heard from staff that's why They are actually asking for approval in the budget and then applying for the grant and that they need that approval in the budget in order to even apply for the grant. Have you seen some of that, Chief Hudson?
Through you, Chair. Yes, it seems there's a wide variety of procedures, mechanisms for applying for grants. They all seem to have their own rules. Some are very much like that, where you have to demonstrate that you have full approval, and almost to the point where you have to demonstrate that you were going to buy it anyway. And others are much more discretionary, shall I say. So it really is situation dependent.
Thank you. Any other comments from committee members on this particular? I know we got a little bit off talking about budgeting process and so in all of this, but to bring it back to the drones and the IT amendment, any other comments? Then seeing none, I will read the resolution and bear with me. Resolve that report Finance 25-23 Drone and Station 2 IT Upgrade Budget Amendment dated March 27, 2025 be received, and that 1, the Finance Committee recommends Council approve the budget amendment of $50,000 for the Drone and Station 2 IT upgrade projects to be funded from the Fire Equipment Replacement Reserve. I'll say from the Equipment Replacement Reserve, because 2, the Finance Committee recommends Council approve the budget amendment of $14,000 for the drone purchase to be funded from the Fire Equipment Replacement Reserve. And that 3, the Finance Committee recommends Council approve the advancement of Phase 2 of Project 02-22-0029 Station 2 IT Upgrade Project, requiring a budget amendment of $18,000 from the 2026 fiscal year to 2025 to be funded from the Fire Equipment Replacement Reserve. And by show of hands, all those in favor of that recommendation? That is carried. And by the way, before Councillor Vardy left, and I realize she has left, so she can't vote, but she did say she supported this too. The 5th discussion report this evening is the procurement bylaw update. If I could have a mover and seconder to get it on the floor, please. Member Thompson, thank you. And Member Demare seconded that. So Mr. Delmonico, if you could walk us through that.
Thank you. The procurement bylaw came to committee for first review in January and is now here for final review and approval. The bylaw was brought to committee as part of a regular update cycle, but it turns out it was quite timely with happenings in the political environment and the emphasis on the Buy Canadian movement. So there's been 2 main changes to the bylaw that are proposed from the first review. Those are being related to the procurement level thresholds, and we've added Appendix D to allow for U.S. vendor exclusions. So let me start with the thresholds. They're outlined on page 1 of the procurement report, the covering report, and they're also shown in Appendix B of the bylaw. And if you look at the covering report, you'll see there's a chart there that shows the previous thresholds and the new proposed thresholds. The direct purchase threshold is proposed to increase from $10,000 to $15,000. So what that means is below that cost threshold, staff have the discretion to reach out to an appropriate vendor directly without needing to get multiple quotes. From $15,000 to $150,000, staff would be required to reach out to several vendors of their choosing to obtain competitive quotes. And then above that $150,000 is the open competition threshold that's increasing from $100,000 to $150,000. At this level, the request for proposals or request for tender, as it may, would be posted publicly for anyone to bid on. Now, the reason for these increases is to recognize the inflation that's taken place since the passing of the last bylaw, and also to provide staff with more leeway to reach out to Canadian vendors as opposed to needing to post for open competition. Changes to the thresholds are highlighted in blue in the draft bylaw attached as appendix to this report. Now, as a government organization, we're obligated to abide by various international trade agreements, so we've not historically had provisions to limit procurement based on country of origin. However, in response to tariffs imposed by the U.S., both provincial and federal governments have called on municipalities to join them in restricting procurements awarded to U.S. vendors, so we've added Schedule D to this effect. The purpose of Schedule D is to allow us to exclude U.S. vendors from our procurement process and direct staff to source goods from Canadian and non-U.S. vendors where operationally feasible. This new provision would apply going forward and allows for discretion to maintain business continuity and business critical functions. Vendors may be required to provide the town with supporting information such as their CRA business number or company profile or other such relevant information to satisfy this requirement. And the intent of this is that we want to ensure that we're supporting companies that employ Canadians, help contribute to the Canadian economy. So for reference, we looked at back and we only paid about $100,000 to US-based vendors going back to the beginning of 2024, so very little. But I'm sure we have many Canadian vendors that source from US suppliers to varying degrees, and that's where things get a little trickier. If I can give you an example, for the fire truck purchase that was purchased last year, that purchase was over $1 million, but we procured that from a company that was based in Western Canada. Where the parts were manufactured and sourced, we don't necessarily know that, but we do know that the truck was delivered from the U.S., so there must have been some U.S. components. Now, what we're recommending with this amendment is that we would still work with companies like this, the rationale being that they employ Canadian workers. I believe this firm, for example, has around 50 from what I could tell. And so, they too do their part to contribute to the Canadian economy. Now, what I suspect is going to happen in the marketplace is that we'll start seeing a shift with Canadian companies in similar positions that start pivoting to more local supply chain alternatives so that they can continue to remain cost competitive in the tariff environment. But I hope that provides you a bit of an overview of what's proposed here with this bylaw.
Thank you. Any questions, comments, concerns? Member Tamir.
So I look at your previous threshold and the new recommended threshold. It's about a 50% increase on those thresholds. Now, we know that we're going to be having some more increased costs, inflation, and perhaps sourcing in Canada that maybe, or sourcing outside of Canada, such as Europe, which is, the exchange rate between Canada and Europe is 50%. So I can appreciate that's going to increase the costs, so that we have to have a threshold. But I was wondering if 50% is a little big jump, expecting this to happen when we're sourcing most, as you said, from Canada, and maybe more province-wide, different provinces, because we don't have to go to the U.S. anymore. So the question is, why was the 50% increase chosen when it's probably, the previous last time you jumped it up, it was, do you know what it was? I don't think it was 50%.
So through the chair, yeah, we looked at the non-residential building construction price index over that time, and that's the one we use for our development charges, and it was, I believe, in the high 30s to low 40% increase since the last bylaw. So we kind of rounded it to the next nearest easy to remember number for staff, because we want that to be the easier it is to remember, the easier it will be for them to follow the rules, and also because that also helps us with our not having to go to open competitions, and then thereby being more efficient to go straight to competitive quotes, enabling more Canadian vendors.
If I can add to that, I believe all of council gets Municipal World and various subscriptions like that sent directly to us. And that's certainly one thing that I've noticed in reading what other municipalities are doing. This was actually a key takeaway from that. The City of Hamilton was looking into that, and others raising the procurement limits that they have to deal with to be able to deal with some of these issues going forward. And likewise, I guess, if there are tariffs on the things that they are purchasing, and if the price may be going up by more than inflation, we may be facing too. And so it's a tool, I guess, to help us deal with it. Member Scandinavo?
Yeah, I think I just had a general comment of, I think going through the procurement process does cost, right? So we shouldn't ignore the cost of having a full open competition, because that requires a lot of staff time and evaluation. So, I mean, it's sort of a double-edged sword, if I may say. I just had one quick question. And I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, but were these changes compared with the BPS allowable thresholds for 2025? Like the broader public sector Ontario? Yeah, sorry, what I meant was the broader public sector guidelines for Ontario. They have thresholds as to when things have to go to open competition. I believe for 2024, it was 121,000. It may have changed for 2025, but I just thought I would ask that question.
Yes, it is in line with those thresholds, yes. Thanks.
Any other questions, thoughts? Seeing none, then the resolution is resolved that Report Finance 25-25, the procurement bylaw update dated March 27, 2025, be received. That Finance Committee recommends to Council that they approve the updated procurement bylaw, which is attached as Appendix A. All those in favor, by show of hands, please. And that is carried. We are almost on our last discussion report, folks. That is 8.6 on our agenda, which is Finance Report 25-26, which is all about our 2024 year-end results and reserve transfers. And if I could have a mover and seconder to get that on the floor before I turn that over to Mr. Delmonico. Councillor Howe, Member Thompson has seconded that. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yes, the purpose of this report is to provide a summary of the financial results for 2024 and approve the final disposition transfers to and from reserves. We're reporting a 2024 operating surplus of $530,000 for the tax-supported levy. Key drivers of the surplus are $600,000 related to savings in staff wages and benefits relating to various staff vacancies that occurred throughout the year. About $230,000 in surplus interest income was earned from investments in bank deposits held. $180,000 of an unbudgeted dividend from Niagara Power Inc. is also contributing to the surplus. And there were additional public works revenues for development applications received in excess of budget. Now, the main driver offsetting those positive variances was unbudgeted WSIB costs of $440,000. We've since reached out to WSIB to obtain a formal quote to see what it would take to become a Schedule I employer, so we can use that to inform future decision-making. Of that $530,000 surplus, $100,000 of that relates to the building department and is being directed back to the building department reserve. Another $88,000 relates to the library's budget and is recommended to be directed to the library reserves. As part of the budget process, funding for the Grimsby Community Development Grant in the amount of $100,000 has been earmarked from surplus and is recommended to be transferred to the tax stabilization reserve for that purpose. And so that leaves $220,000, which is recommended to be directed to our corporate projects reserve. On the water wastewater side of things, we have a small surplus in water operations, but a $2 million deficit for wastewater operations. This was primarily a result of actual regional wastewater charges coming in $1.5 million higher than budgeted. The regional budget is based on the average of the past 3-year wastewater flows into the treatment plant. However, the region advised us of an error that caused past flows to be underreported, and then with the error corrected for, the actual flows have now come in much higher than was budgeted. Now, inflow and infiltration may also be contributing to the higher than expected wastewater flows into the regional treatment plant. Problem areas have been isolated by our Public Works Department, and remediation work is set to begin this year. A relatively wet year also led to less water consumption, and then by extension, that means less wastewater recoveries. Now, on the capital side of things, you'll see that Appendix B provides a summary of that. We have $44 million worth of capital projects in progress at the end of 2024 that are being carried forward to 2025. More than half of that relates to the Peach King Center, with over 27 million being carried forward into 2025 as of year end. And Appendix C provides a summary of the recommended transfers to and from reserves. The second last column in Appendix C from the right, refers to 2024 year-end surplus, it's titled. It shows which reserves the surplus is being directed to and which reserve the wastewater deficit is being funded from. Now, I would like to note that the reserve balances shown in Appendix C are what's reflected in our general ledger balances as of the end of the year. It does not include commitments against the reserves, for example, reserve funding approved as part of the 2025 capital budget. And we'll be bringing more fulsome reserve status update to a future meeting, as we discussed earlier, most likely as part of the year-end financials once that audit's taken place. So the audit is set to start next week, and we're planning on bringing those audited financial statements to the committee for approval in June. Thank you.
Questions? Member Demare.
So I'm looking under the capital summary, Appendix B, and the grand total. So you're carrying forward, looks like 63.4, and then you had another 10 plus, so that takes you up to 74. And then you got an actual of 18, so your carry forward is 44 for the year. And I just wanted to know, maybe explain to me in a sense, are we sort of treading water? Are we going up or down on our attacking our budget in a sense, trying to increase the capital budget? Or are we holding steady just as we pay it off and bring new ones on, or is it improving, especially with the tax increase that's been agreed to?
Yeah, so for some context, we had roughly 10 million in capital projects approved as part of the 2024 capital budget, and then just recently we had about 22 million in capital projects approved as part of the 2025 capital budget. So it does fluctuate from year to year depending on needs required at the time, and because capital projects tend to extend beyond one fiscal year, there tends to be an ebb and flow of the level of capital projects that are outstanding at any given time. Help answer your question.
I was just trying to look and say where we're going with this, in a sense that, I'm trying to get more capital projects done because we're now itemizing them. So there's more capital projects coming forward. We only have a certain ability to deal with them or pay them down. And the question is I assume this is going to go up, and that's one of the reasons is that we're getting tax increases for the next number of years to deal with the need for capital replacement.
Yeah, so these projects are all funded from reserves or in some cases from debt, like the Peach King Center would be the one that includes some debt funding. So the funding for these projects has already been approved and committed from reserves. So these projects themselves won't affect future increases. I guess it'll be the future projects that come forward that may be required that would be funded from reserves, but then those reserves end up being funded from operating budgets and asset management levies. So they will be dependent on more on what comes forward in the future. Will drive those future operating increases.
I'll just add to that. I know we always get these reports and they show carry forwards, and the concern even in the last 2 years, I'll say, was that the carry forwards were looking quite large. You always have to take the Peach King Center out of the equation to really get the rest of the projects, because then you're comparing apples to apples. The Peach King Center is like that orange that gets thrown into the mix that just distorts the numbers by so much. But I do recall our town manager sharing with the corporate leadership team that there were a number of projects that had not been finished. And so the push a year ago was really to get those done, not to come back with lots of new ones. It just adds to the workload and the list of things that show up on these reports. And so there was a real push, I'm going to say, in 2024 to get those done as much as possible. If that helps, because I think that helps explain the swing in what came to from 10 million to 22 million. I think 24 was purposely kind of, I'll say the budget for 24 for capital projects was much leaner, just because the theme was let's get done what we had approved in 23 and not add so much into 24, and let's really get on top of all of this, which has been done. Now that we're getting back more on track that way, I think when we got into the 2025 budget with capital projects, it was kind of a fresh start again. Not to say we don't have carry forwards, because we do. I certainly, especially as accountants, we live by fiscal years, right? We've got to get this done and so on. But projects don't work that way. Many of them start with the design work in the fall time, perhaps, when things get slow. And as Mike Myers said, there's 2 seasons in Toronto, right? Winter and construction season. Was that his answer? And truly, I guess it kind of is like that in the municipal world too, right? So once construction season finishes, then my sense of watching the staff is then they get into designs and working on the next projects. But you can't even take that step unless the project has been approved in total, right? So you're not going to do the design work and have that approved and then have council come back 3 months later and say, nah, we decided we don't want you to do that project, and you've just wasted all the time and effort on design work, right? So very often projects seem to need to be approved in total, and then they work on the design work perhaps in the fall or early winter, and then when we get past winter, then the actual construction takes place of whatever the capital project is too. Not all, obviously, there are things we do inside in the winter, but there seems to be that ebb and flow, and that it is really common for projects to lag over our year ends. I saw a hand up here though. Member Scandinavo, did you have a thought you wanted to share?
Yeah, no, thank you. I was just more or less going to, I think, try to paraphrase what the treasurer said. So in essence, all capital projects are either financed via the reserve, a grant, debt, and the annual levy charged in terms of taxes goes to pay operating expenses and then replenish those reserves. So in a nutshell, what we've committed to, we have funds available for future tax increases. I guess need to look forward to sort of the 10-year capital plan of what's next. Have I captured that correctly?
Yes, very well. That was good.
And in fact, if I can add to that, in our committee work of the last number of months, we looked at those types of questions too, right, about how to finance these issues. And that basically is the town's policy now, that Finance Committee and staff finished looking at all of that, that first and foremost, we will, fund operations from the tax levy, but when it comes to capital projects, they'll be funded from reserves, grants, and then lastly, debt. And that is the policy that and I'll say the principles that we're going to be budgeting under. Councillor Howe, did you have a hand up?
Through you, Chair. Director, did you say June for the draft audit? That's a little bit early for us, isn't it? We're getting closer to the first of the year all the time. But no, I'm just saying that I noted that because I can remember times when, we were damn near through the year and, you're dealing with that, those type of reports or even the audits. So congratulations, looking forward to it, and maybe we even get to council for the final come July.
Yeah, I would say, don't congratulate us just yet, but that's what we're aiming for, and we'll certainly strive for that.
So on this report on our year-end results and the reserve, any other comments or thoughts from committee members this evening? Seeing none, then resolve that report Finance 25-26, the 2024 year-end results, and the reserve transfers dated March 27, 2025 be received, that the Finance Committee recommends that the 2024 surplus and deficit, because it flips both ways, listed below be transferred to and from reserves as outlined in Appendix C, $530,263 in operational levy, a deficit of $2.2,067,384 in wastewater, $181,620 surplus in water, and $1,943 surplus in the Grimsby Downtown Business Improvement Area. That the Finance Committee also recommends $100,000 of the year-end surplus be approved as a budget amendment to fund the 2025 Grimsby Community Development Grant Program. All those by show of hands. In favor, please. And that is carried. Back to our agenda. Item number 9 on our agenda is correspondence, and we have none this evening. Item number 10 is other business. Is there any other business that any committee members would like to raise? I see heads shaking no, so we will say there's nothing under item number 10 then. Item 11, the date of our next meeting is Thursday, April 24th at 6 p.m. Thank you, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.